everybody! So it's Wednesday and now it is time to look at our next entry in the Disney canon. And we are at film number 11 and it is The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. And this was released in 1949 and it is the last of our package era. So we finished it, yay! Second least favorite era of Disney films. But I think there's still a lot of enjoyment. I don't think any of them are awful, horrible sit-throughs. They're all watchable and they're all enjoyable. So this is the second one that they did that's basically like the combination of two stories. You have your Fun and Fancy Free, finds two stories, Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame and The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. It starts with our British story and that is narrated by Basil Rathbone. And we learn about J. Thaddeus Toad, who is a character that is anthropomorphic. All of the characters in Mr. Toad are anthropomorphic, but it's one of those anthropomorphic movies, unlike say Zootopia, that they're humans and animals, kind of like Pinocchio, where they just kind of live together in this sort of strange quasi-world. So you have humans in the court, and then you have animals also testifying, so whatever. So you have J. Thaddeus Toad as friends in a rat and a mole and a badger. And he is wild. And then we get this from Mr. Toad's Wild Ride at Disneyland, my favorite ride at Disneyland. He loves anything that's fast and crazy and gives him an adrenaline. He's kind of an adrenaline junkie. And at the beginning of the film, he's obsessed with horse and carriages, buggy rides kind of things. And he's zooming all about the town. And so they try to confront him, his friends try to confront him about that, but it turns out he's found a new mania. And it is motor cars. They end up getting accused of stealing a motor car. These weasels and this man named Mr. Winky, who's this barkeeper, and they say that he stole their car. Well, in reality, he actually bought the car from them. They had stolen it, and he had given them the deed to Toad Hall. That's how much he wanted this car. So he sold his house in return for this car. And there's just this crazy courtroom scene that is one of the weirder moments in all of Disney, where you see this horse, Cyril Proudbottom, and he's on two legs and he's testifying and it's really odd. And he's talking about how this car had already been stolen by the weasels. Well, they still convict him and they send him away for life for stealing this car, which is pretty hardcore. They're very strict on their car theft. I mean, come on. And the weasels end up taking control of Toad Hall and he is devastated. He's a reformed, repentant Toad, and so he ends up escaping from prison. And then he meets up with Mole and Badger and Rat, and he tries to get them to hide him, and they end up going to Toad Hall and finding out that they did lie and that he did give them the deed, which is crazy when you think about it because he sold his house for a car. They're able to find the deed. This long sequence between the weasels and Toad and the gang trying to get the deed. They get the deed, he ends up becoming vindicated, and at the end you think that he has learned his lesson. He's no longer going to participate in this kind of mania, but then we see him riding an airplane, and that's obviously his new mania. So it's sort of this kind of a funny story, you know, that some people are who they are, and you know, that's it. Wild Ride in Disneyland, he goes to hell, which I think is crazy. I love that. That's hilarious. So it's an interesting story, you know, kind of about, it's sort of a nursery rhyme kind of story, teaching kids about mania and being obsessed with things and being honest and everything. And it's very just creative and different. And then we get to our part with The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And this I think is probably more memorable. I think this is a true ghost story, and I don't mind ghost stories for kids. I think those can be a lot of fun, but I don't like it when they work in darker elements and something becomes tonally dissonant into a story that doesn't belong. And when it just becomes mean, there's something that's always sort of fun about a ghost story. Crosby narrating this portion of the film, and he is singing a lot of it. He sings about Ichabod, Ichabod Crane, and we meet Ichabod, and he is kind of an interesting character. He's very superstitious, and he is very kind of shallow, And there's no real dialogue in this section. It's just all sort of the storytelling from Bing. And we learned that he is the school teacher, and there's this other character named Brom Bones. There is this woman named Katrina von Tassel, who is the daughter of the richest farmer in town. And so Ichabod kind of puts his sight on her, both because she's pretty, but also because she is so rich, which is sort of a weird element to have in a Disney film, to have sort of the protagonist be a gold digger, but it's all part of a ghost story. So I think it kind of works within the sort of realm of a ghost story and a character sort of learning their lesson by the end. So Brom Bones, who's sort of a Gaston type, he is also in love with Katrina, and they go sort of back and forth. And Brom learns at this party, Brom learns that Ichabod is superstitious. And so he tells the story about the Headless Horseman, and there's a great song about the Ballad of the Headless Horseman. And then Ichabod goes out into the forest and he meets the Headless Horseman, and it is a beautifully animated scene. It's scary, it's horrifying, it's very, very, very fluid and beautifully drawn, and you kind of get an untidy ending. So basically Ichabod runs off in fear. They never hear from him again. You see the pieces of pumpkin on the bridge, and you see Brom and Katrina end up getting married. And so that's sort of interesting because both of these stories have kind of untidy endings, which is something that I kind of like about both of them. And they're both kind of nursery rhyme type stories with a big lesson to be learned about the main character. And one is a ghost story and one is a more traditional fable. This movie is really interesting because Wind in the Willows had actually been optioned by Disney in 1941, and he wanted to make it into a full-length feature film. But with everybody leaving for the war, it became something that probably wasn't going to happen, so things had to get deducted, and it ended up being part of a package film. And then you have the Sleepy Hollow portions, which were considered pretty scary for that period, but you have Pinocchio, it sort of has some of those same elements to it. And they kind of created this combination of the two with these books and this library at the beginning, but there's really not a whole lot in common to them except for protagonists kind of learning their lessons. But they are sort of an odd combination. So later on you would see these stories published differently or distributed differently. You'd see them as part of different compilations, and a lot of people probably haven't seen the two together. I really like both. I think they're both really creative. I think it is the best of the package films, the best animated, and I think they have the best storytelling of any of the package films. So they're my favorite. And next week we are going to talk about Cinderella. I'm so excited to talk about Cinderella. So let me know what you think of the Ichabod and Mr. Toad. Do you like the Mr. Toad story? Was the Ichabod story too scary for you as a kid? It definitely was pretty scary for me. But like I said, it's sort of all within the tone and feel of a ghost story. So let me know what you think of these, and thanks so much. Please subscribe to my channel. I'll talk to you later. Bye!